Okay. And this recording will be posted on the panel's webpage. But the land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking UP tribe, the Amamutsun tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. La tierra en lo que nos reímos es el territorio cedido de la tribu Yupi de habla Awaswas. La banda tribal Amamutsun, compuesta por los descendientes de los indígenas llevados a las misiones de Santa Cruz y San Juan Bautista durante la colonización española de la costa central, trabaja hoy arduamente para restaurar las prácticas tradicionales de administración en estas tierras y sanar el trauma histórico. So these are the rules for this meeting. We ask that you please leave your audio on mute unless when you're speaking. Towards the end of this meeting, we will open it up for public questions. And if you're on the phone, just press asterisk and then the number 9 to raise your hand to ask a question when that time comes. Please be courteous to one another. If at some point you disrespectful to somebody in the Zoom call, please know you will be dropped by one of the hosts. Por favor, silencie su audio cuando no esté hablando. Se podrá usted poder hablar ya cuando sea la sección de preguntas al final, hacia el final de la junta. Si está en el teléfono, por favor presionen el asterisco y el número 9 para poder alzar su mano. Por favor, sea cortés con otros participantes. En algún momento le llega a faltar el respeto a uno de los participantes, usted será sacado de la llamada por uno de los huéspedes. Okay, and I would like to now pass it on to the chair of the panel, Dr. Raminder Siri.
Thank you, Azucena, and greetings, everyone. Welcome to this meeting. Thank you for sharing your Friday evening with us. It has been my great pleasure to chair the independent review panel, whose work has finished with the completion of our final 2 reports, the feasibility report and the summary report. Nearly all the panel members are with us this evening, except one who is traveling and sends his regrets. And those present today are Professor Julie Lockwood from Rutgers University, Research Professor Adina Payton from University of California, Santa Cruz, and Dr. Robert Rocher, Mr. Philip Berge, and Ms. Sharon Kenny.
Hola, bienvenida a todos. Disculpen, un segundo, por favor. Estoy sacando mi página. Ok, buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos a esta junta. Está hablando con nosotros el presidente del panel, el doctor Raminder Siri, y aquí presentó a los otros miembros del panel, cuales son Adina Payton, Julie Lockwood, Shannon Kenny, Philip Berge y Bob Rocher, y ahorita con nosotros que no está Robert Glennon.
Thank you. So on behalf of the panel, let me confirm our unanimous support for all our findings, conclusions, and recommendations. The panel has met at least weekly over the past year and dedicated long hours of research, analysis, and discussions to complete our work. We also participated in 2 field trips to the Salton Sea region and northern Mexico. And during this process, we also have sought the public's feedback and engaged with all the parties who submitted ideas for water importation. We have been truly an independent panel, and after today's meeting, the panel's charge is completed and the panel will no longer exist.
El doctor Suri cabe decir que quiere confirmar en los hallazgos y lo que encontró el panel en las conclusiones y recomendaciones, que ellos están apoyando los resultados. El panel ha estado, durante el último año se han estado juntando regularmente, por lo menos una vez a la semana, y han dedicando mucho tiempo en su análisis y discusión para completar este trabajo, estos reportes. El panel ha participado en 2 viajes al Salton Sea en la región, y uno fue en la región de Salton Sea y el otro fue en el norte de México. Y luego también el panel hizo el trabajo de agarrar los comentarios del público en la región. Entonces se puede decir que en realidad el panel es independientemente. Y después de la junta de hoy, el panel ya no existirá porque ya será de que se completó todo su trabajo y ya no van a seguir trabajando como el panel independiente.
Thank you. So the panel is very thankful for all the assistance provided by the support teams from University of California, Santa Cruz, led by Professor Brent Haddad, and also by Kennedy Jenks Consultants. Without their support, this work would not have been possible. So thank you very much. And we also acknowledge the assistance provided by Ms. Azucena Beltran, our project coordinator, and who's doing this wonderful translation for us today. And at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Azucena and to Professor Brent Haddad of UC Santa Cruz, who has served as the principal investigator of this project.
En este momento, el panel quería decir que está muy agradecido con la asistencia que proveyó el equipo de soporte de la Universidad de California, Santa Cruz, que fue guiado por el profesor Brent Haddad y también por los consultantes Kennedy Jenks. Sin el apoyo de ellos, esto no hubiera sido posible y por eso están muy agradecidos. Quería también, Rominder me dio gracias por traducir esta junta. Y ahora quedará pasarle el micrófono al profesor Brent Haddad.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rominder. And so it's my pleasure now to tell you about the findings and what the panel has concluded. And Azucena, why don't we start with some background on the panel, and maybe you can ask me some questions, and I'll be happy to reply.
Of course. Ahorita el profesor Haddad está diciendo que podemos comenzar el diálogo de la junta y estamos a punto de comenzar. Yo le preguntaré unas preguntas al profesor y él me responderá. Okay, Brent, as a reminder, what is this panel? What is its authority and who is on it? Como recordatorio, ¿qué es este panel? ¿Cuál es su autoridad y quién está en él?
The panel is composed of 7 nationally recognized experts. It's chaired, as you know, by Professor Rominder Suri of Temple University. The panel's end products are analyses and recommendations to the state on the feasibility of importation approaches to restore the Salton Sea. The panel itself has no authority over what will be done with its recommendation. That's up to the state.
El panel está compuesto por 7 expertos reconocidos a nivel nacional, presididos por el profesor Raminder Suri de la Universidad de Temple. Los productos finales del panel son análisis y recomendaciones al Estado sobre la viabilidad de enfoques de importación para restaurar el Salton Sea. El panel mismo no tiene autoridad sobre lo que se hará con su recomendación, eso depende del Estado. Another question would be, what are these 2 new reports the panel has published? ¿Qué son estos 2 nuevos informes que ha publicado el panel?
The first is the Feasibility Report. It's a feasibility analysis of water importation options for the Salton Sea. It analyzed costs, benefits, geologic considerations, permitting, and timing for 3 approaches to importing water.
El primer reporte es el informe de viabilidad, es un análisis de las opiniones de importación de agua para el Salton Sea. Es un análisis con costos, beneficios, consideraciones geológicas, permisos y tiempos de 3 enfoques para importar agua.
The second report is the summary report. It describes the panel's findings and recommendations based on the feasibility report. It also points out areas that require additional research.
Y el segundo reporte es el reporte resumido que describe los hallazgos y recomendaciones del panel con base en el informe de factibilidad. También señala áreas que requieren investigación adicional. So, Brent, where are we in the overall process? ¿Dónde estamos en el proceso general?
So these are the public meetings we've had since we started the project. And we are now at the 4th dot there on the timeline with our final meeting with the public. And it began, the first public meeting, the project began earlier, but our first public meeting was in October of 21.
Aquí Brent nos está enseñando todas las juntas que hemos tenido cuando en octubre fue la primera junta, en octubre del año pasado. Y ahorita, que es septiembre del 2022, es la junta en la que estamos todos.
And here is a more detailed look at what we've done, and I won't go through all the details. But we met most recently right here in the timeline when we presented the panel's fatal flaw report. And now we are here at the end of summer of 22, presenting the feasibility study and the summary report. And as you can see, this concludes the panel's work, and the panel will cease to exist.
Aquí nos está enseñando una imagen en que hay una vista más detallada de todas las actividades que el panel ha hecho durante el año. Comienza con la formación del panel en el verano del 2021, dando pasos importantes en el proyecto y preparando sus informes. Nos reunimos aquí por última vez, donde ven las flechas rojas, la segunda flecha roja, que es cuando el panel completó su informe de estos últimos 2 reportes. La última vez que nos miramos fue al finales de la primavera, que viene siendo la primera flecha roja que está mirando en la pantalla. So Brent, can you tell us what's the panel's definition of feasibility? Nos dirá cuál es la definición de factibilidad del panel.
So the panel's definition of feasibility has 3 parts. The first is technical feasibility, which is, can the project do what it is supposed to do? The second is economic feasibility, and that is, can the project be built within a predetermined cost range? And then the third part is social and political feasibility. And this has to do with the benefits expected from the project. And the question is the project likely to deliver the benefits it is supposed to deliver? And the panel has evaluated all of the projects in all of these respects.
La definición de factibilidad, como definida por el panel, tiene tres partes. Uno es la viabilidad técnica. ¿Puede un proyecto hacer lo que se supone que debe hacer? Lo siguiente es la viabilidad económica. ¿Se puede construir el proyecto dentro de un rango de costos predeterminado, sí o no? Y la tercera viene siendo la viabilidad sociopolítica y tiene que ver con los beneficios. Es probable que el proyecto entregue los beneficios que se supone que debe entregar. El panel ha evaluado todos los proyectos en todos estos aspectos. Turning now to the feasibility report, what importation projects did the panel analyze? En cuanto vamos a devolver con el informe de factibilidad, ¿cuáles son los proyectos de importación que analizó el panel?
The panel settled on 3 projects. The first is called the Sea of Cortez Import Project. Here's our definition of feasibility slide. The first one is the Sea of Cortez Import Project, and that was based on the submissions to the states and panel's request for information that passed the fatal flaw analysis. And these submissions had overlapping similarities and were combined into a single project for feasibility review. And let me show you a map of that first project. And so the three colored lines are the pipeline routes of the 3 projects arriving here at the Salton Sea.
El grupo se decidió por 3 proyectos. El primero se llama Proyecto de Importación de Mar del Cortés. Se basa en los envíos a la solicitud de información del Estado y del panel que pasó el análisis de defectos fatales. Esas presentaciones tenían similitudes y se combinaron en un solo proyecto para la revisión de factibilidad. Aquí nos demuestra el profesor Bren un mapa que muestra los 3 diferentes proyectos que pasaron las fallas fatales y que extraen agua del Mar de Cortés y la llevan al Salton Sea.
The second project was identified by the panel as an extension of a proposed desalination project called the Binational Project. It was an attempt by the panel to increase project benefits provided to Mexico. It involves a US-Mexico water exchange similar to one suggested in response number 9 of the submitted responses. Here's a map of it. Water is desalinated at the Sea of Cortez and delivered to Mexico's Morelos Dam, which is located right here. It's right near the city of Yuma, but it's in Mexico. And that water from desalination is for use in Mexico. And an equivalent amount of water is diverted from the Colorado River at the All-American Canal for use in the Salton Sea. And that is called the Sea of Cortez Exchange Project.
El segundo proyecto que fue identificado por el panel fue una extensión de un proyecto de desalinización que viene siendo cuando se le quita la sal al agua salada, que fue propuesto por el proyecto binacional. Fue un intento del panel de aumentar los beneficios del proyecto proporcionados a México. Involucra un intercambio de agua entre Estados Unidos y México, similar a la respuesta que metió una solicitud que se llama en el reporte de respuesta número 9. Este viene siendo que el agua se desaliniza del mar de Cortés y se entrega a la presa Morelos de México para su uso en México. Una cantidad equivalente se desvía del río Colorado al canal americano para su uso en el Salton Sea. El informe se llama Proyecto de Intercambio del Mar de Cortés. Este mapa muestra la ubicación de la infraestructura para este enfoque. Así que viene siendo extraer agua del Mar de Cortés, desalinarla y llevarla a Morelos. Y así Salton Sea agarra más agua del río Colorado. Viene siendo el intercambio.
So the panel identified a third approach, and that involved Colorado River water. It is called the Colorado River Voluntary Transfer Approach. It involves the state compensating participating farmers, irrigation districts, counties, farm workers, and businesses who are impacted by the transfer of water from current agricultural uses to the Salton Sea. And this map shows that essentially no new infrastructure is needed for this approach.
Y el tercero viene de que identificó el panel como un tercer plan, fue sido el relacionado con el río Colorado y se llama el enfoque de transferencia voluntaria del río Colorado. Implica que el Estado compensa a los agricultores participantes, a los distritos de riego, los condados, los trabajadores agrícolas y las empresas que se ven afectadas por la transferencia de agua de los usos agrícolas actuales al Salton Sea. Este mapa muestra que esencialmente no se necesita infraestructura para este enfoque. So, Professor Haddad, how do these three approaches compare to each other? ¿Cómo se comparan estos tres enfoques entre sí?
Ms. Beltran, here's the first of three slides that provide some comparison. And we'll get to the two scenarios of the Sea of Cortez import project in a moment, but you see Sea of Cortez importation, Sea of Cortez exchange, and Colorado River voluntary transfer here on the right. And the earliest anticipated imported water for the Sea of Cortez projects is 2045. And for the Colorado River voluntary transfer project, 2026.
Entonces aquí estamos mirando una imagen donde se puede ver en el arriba en azul, está en la segunda columna la importación del Mar de Cortés, que siendo vamos a suponer como proyecto número 1. El segundo viene siendo Mar de Cortés, un intercambio con el Mar de Cortés, y que viene siendo la que tiene la planta desalinadora. Y la tercera viene siendo transferencias voluntarias del río Colorado. Y como pueden ver, mirando estos tres proyectos, la importación del Mar de Cortés puede comenzar lo más pronto que puede comenzar es el 2045, cuando el tercero, que viene siendo la transferencia voluntaria del río Colorado, lo más pronto viene siendo el 2026.
So the expected elevation of the Salton Sea by 2078, and this is the 2078 is the end of the modeling that the panel did. It doesn't mean that the project stops at 2078. It just means that that was how far out the panel did its different models. In any event, you can see that for the Sea of Cortez import project, we're looking at negative 233 feet and negative 239 feet. And then for this exchange, negative 261, and for the voluntary transfer, negative 258.
Mirando basado en el modelo que usó el panel, es un modelo que calcula el nivel del agua basado en cantidades de importación de agua y es basado con proyecciones hasta el año 2078. No quiere decir que el proyecto se acaba en ese año, simplemente fue la cantidad de años que se hizo para enseñar este modelo. Y se enseña que importar agua del mar de Cortés nos trae el nivel del Salton Sea a negativos de 233 y viene siendo para el intercambio, viene siendo negativo en 261 y para la transferencia viene siendo en negativo 258.
So the panel recognized that a goal of roughly ocean salinity had been stated in one of the state's environmental impact statements. And so as a matter of comparison, the panel looked at when would the sea return under these different scenarios to 40,000 milligrams per liter, which is roughly sea salinity. And the first scenario of the Sea of Cortez import projects never does. It remains above that amount. The second scenario arrives there at 2046, the exchange approach 2048, and the voluntary transfer approach 2051.
En la segunda línea que dice el año del proyecto logrando de 40,000 miligramos por litro de salinidad en el Salton Sea, eso viene siendo la cantidad que viene siendo la misma cantidad de sal que tiene el océano. Y para que el proyecto pueda lograr, porque yo pienso que ya todos sabemos que el Salton Sea tiene más salinidad que el océano, para lograr la salinidad es solo de un océano. La importación de Mar de Cortés no haría eso hasta el 2046, el año 2046. El Mar de Cortés con el intercambio no pasaría hasta el 2048 y con la transferencia voluntaria pasaría en el 2051.
And the last line is how much exposed playa, which is seabed, would be remediated in each of the scenarios, and none is needed for the Sea of Cortez import project, and 30,000 acres would be remediated in the Sea of Cortez exchange and voluntary transfer approach.
Y la tercera línea nos demuestra los acres de playa que fueron expuestos y remediados, o sea que se hicieron proyectos en ellos para calmar el polvo. Y no hay para la importación del Mar del Cortés, pero para el intercambio con el Mar del Cortés se tendría que hacer proyectos en 30,000 de playa expuesta, de acres de playa expuesta, y para transferencia voluntaria con el río Colorado se tendría que remediar 30,000 acres también de playa expuesta.
So this is, were you still going?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you can clarify why does the Sea of Cortez import project have two scenarios as we move forward?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Porque el proyecto tiene dos escenarios para el proyecto de importación de Mar de Cortés.
So I'll answer that right now, and then I'll get to this last slide of comparison. The Sea of Cortez import project was a comparison, was it basically a combination of three submissions, importation submissions, and the three were similar enough to be combined into one, with one exception. And that exception was the size of a second desalination plant located at the Salton Sea. And so both of the Sea of Cortez approaches, well, the three you see here, all of them have desalination occurring at the Sea of Cortez. They also all have desalination occurring at the Salton Sea. So there's more than one desalination plant involved. And for the, on the left-hand side, scenario 1 and scenario 2, one of them has scenario 1 has a much smaller desalination plant, and scenario 2 has a much larger one. And let me just mention that the larger one is the same for all three scenarios besides scenario 1, or I should say all three projects, but not scenario 1.
Okay. La diferencia entre el escenario, o como quería decir, el guión de 1 o 2 de la importación del Mar de Cortés viene siendo el tamaño de la planta desalinadora. Pero es importante anotar que el guión número 2 tiene el mismo tamaño de la planta desalinadora que los demás proyectos. El único que viene siendo de diferente tamaño es la del guión 1. Y está demostrando esta imagen con los servicios de ecosistema, la calidad del aire y salud humana que traen los proyectos que no pueden ser calculados, pero sí calcularon los beneficios monetizados de valor actual desde el 2022 al 2078.
So turning to this final table, this is a summary of projected benefits from the different projects. And the bottom line has in the net present value of benefits in billions. And you can see that for scenario 2 and Sea of Cortez exchange and voluntary transfer, there's an expected range of $2.1 to $6.1 billion if these projects are implemented. And it's slightly less for scenario 1. But let me note that if you look above, you see ecosystem services and air quality and human health. And the panel studied in great detail the ecosystem service benefits and the air quality and human health benefits, and could not arrive at a range of cost that was dependable, but believes that those costs would be in benefits, a range of benefits. The panel believes those benefits are in the billions of dollars. It's just that it couldn't arrive at even a range that it felt would make sense to write out as numbers. So instead, it's just putting these pluses that indicate that implementing these projects would provide those benefits. They're just extremely difficult to quantify without additional research.
En esta tabla es difícil, cuando miran las sumas, es de que la tabla quiere enseñar si fueran estos beneficios monetizados, cuánto sería el precio de esos beneficios que se agarrarían con estos proyectos. Y estamos mirando en los billones. No se ve un número que fue calculado para los servicios de ecosistema o calidad de aire y salud humana, porque el panel decidió que era muy difícil calcular, pero quiere reconocer que sería mucho, estaría en los billones. Y abajo donde mira el 1.1 al 2.2 y los dígitos viene siendo el rango del costo de los beneficios que agarraría la región por cada proyecto.
And then in terms of costs, the It's divided between initial costs, annual operation and maintenance or O&M, and then a net present value for those costs, and then also a separate cost for the cost of the water importation. And the reason these are separated out this way is because there are two aspects to the projects. One is the desalination occurring at the Salton Sea, and another is the cost of actually importing water to the Salton Sea. And so that's the water importation cost at the bottom is just that water importation cost to the Salton Sea divided up as dollars per acre foot. And so let's look at the net present value numbers. These are in billions of dollars. The cost of the two scenarios of the Sea of Cortez import project are 94.7 and $147.7 billion. For the Sea of Cortez exchange, $102.1 billion. And for the voluntary transfer project, $63.6 billion. And then just looking at the water importation costs, it ranges for the first scenario, or well, for both scenarios, between $4,700 and $5,900 per acre foot delivered. For the Sea of Cortez exchange project, between $9,000 and $11,300 per acre foot delivered. And for the voluntary transfer project, $230 per acre foot delivered.
Y ahora el profesor está demostrando el análisis que se hizo para calcular los costos que traería cada proyecto. Cada proyecto se fue calculado los costos iniciales y el costo de OIM anual en dinero, y también el valor actual neto para cada proyecto y los costos de importación de agua que viene siendo por acre de pie, y viene dividido y calculado por cada proyecto individualmente. Y cuando miran la renglera número 1 y 3, estamos hablando en los billones.
So, yeah. Oh, go on.
So, would you explain us more in summary, what did the panel learn by undertaking this analysis? ¿Qué aprendió el panel para realizar este análisis?
So far, oh, what?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So far, we've been focused on the feasibility analysis. And now let's go to the summary report. And the panel made a series of crucial findings, and they're summarized on this slide. And let's go through all three. The first one is, panel found that it is possible to minimize playa-related air quality risks through playa remediation. And what that means is you don't have to flood the playa to minimize the air quality risks.
Okay. Entonces los hallazgos del panel están explicados en el reporte resumido. El reporte de efectividad enseña todo el análisis, los costos y la infraestructura y todo eso, pero para saber sobre los hallazgos del panel se tendrá que ver en el reporte resumido. El primer hallazgo es que es posible minimizar los riesgos de calidad del aire relacionados con la playa a través de la remediación de la playa.
So the second finding is that it is possible to remove and dispose of sufficient salt from the Salton Sea to return it to seawater salinity.
Y el segundo hallazgo es que es posible extraer y deshacerse de suficiente sal del Salton Sea para poder devolverlo a la salinidad que viene siendo igual que la del océano. de 40,000 miligramos por litro.
And the third finding is that it is unnecessary to return the Salton Sea to its mid to late 20th century volume and elevation to achieve long-term restoration benefits. A smaller sea can achieve equivalent or superior benefits.
Y el tercer hallazgo del panel, yo siento que no es necesario devolver el Salton Sea al volumen y elevación de los años en los que estaban los años del siglo XX para lograr beneficios de restauración a largo plazo. Un Salton Sea pues más pequeño puede lograr beneficios equivalentes o superiores. Yeah. So, why do these three findings matter so much? ¿Por qué esos tres hallazgos son tan importantes?
Because achieving the benefits of Salton Sea restoration without refilling the sea to its 20th century volume will avoid environmental damage and save Californians billions of dollars.
La razón por qué estos hallazgos son muy importantes es porque los beneficios de la restauración del Salton Sea sin volver a llenar el mar a su volumen del siglo XX evitará daños ambientales y ahorrará miles de millones de dólares a todos los que viven en California. Did the panel reach conclusions on the feasibility of the three importation approaches? Llegó el panel a conclusiones sobre la viabilidad en los tres enfoques de importación de agua.
Yes. The panel did not find the first two approaches to be feasible and does not recommend them. The panel did find the third approach, the Colorado River Voluntary Transfer Project, to be feasible and does recommend it.
La respuesta es sí. El panel no encontró factibles los dos primeros enfoques y no los recomienda. Y el panel encontró factible el tercer enfoque, el proyecto de transferencia voluntaria del río Colorado, y también lo recomienda. So, is the panel recommending drying the sea up? ¿Está el panel recomendando secar el mar?
No. The panel is recommending stabilizing the sea at a smaller but still large volume and focusing on rapidly lowering its salinity to maintain and restore ecological functions. The panel's recommended approach is a whole sea approach with uniform salinity throughout the sea, except for natural variations.
Así que no, el panel no está recomendando secar el Salton Sea. Lo que recomienda el panel es estabilizar el Salton Sea en un volumen más pequeño, pero aún grande, y así se pueden enfocarse en reducir rápidamente la salinidad para mantener y restaurar las funciones ecológicas. El enfoque recomendado por el panel es un enfoque de solución para todo el mar con salinidad uniforme, es aceptable para variaciones naturales. So what specifically are the panel's recommendations? ¿Cuáles son específicamente las recomendaciones del panel?
So just before I get to the specific recommendations, here is what our model suggests the sea would look like under the panel's recommendation. And you can see that it's the green circle that would be the long-term size of the Salton Sea.
Antes de llegar a la pregunta, quería demostrar el mapa que La recomendación del panel viene mirándose como se ve en esta imagen, si persiguen la línea verde, ese sería el tamaño del Salton si se sigue la recomendación.
So getting to what the panel is recommending, these are the panel's recommendations for immediate action. The first is to begin planning and permitting for a Salton Sea desalination facility.
Las recomendaciones del panel para hacer acción inmediata es de empezar a iniciar la planificación y permisos para la instalación de desalinización del Salton Sea.
Let me clarify what this desalination plant would do. It would take water out of the Salton Sea. It would remove its salt and put the water back into the sea. However, let me just go ahead and say that part.
El profesor quería clarificar que la planta desalinadora saca agua del Salton Sea, le quita la sal y devuelve el agua para atrás al Salton Sea.
When that happens, some water remains with the salt that is removed. And so that salt and the water would be removed from the sea.
Pero también quería dar una nota de que cuando se hace ese proceso, poquita agua se queda con la sal cuando se extrae la sal del agua. Así que sería poquita agua que no devolvería para atrás.
So the second recommendation is begin studies to minimize the cost of the brine drying and salt disposal.
La segunda recomendación es iniciar estudios para minimizar el costo de secar la sal y de deshacerse de ella.
Let me mention that the costs we looked at a moment ago are using current technologies for brine drying and salt disposal. And the panel thinks there's a good chance that those costs could come down with further research.
Quería también apuntar que los costos de sacarle la sal al agua es basado con tecnología que es usada ahorita. Así que el panel piensa que ese precio de desalinización puede bajar mucho si se investiga un poco más.
Next, the panel recommends that the state immediately expand its playa remediation programs that it has started at the Salton Sea.
Y la tercera recomendación del panel es de que el estado haga más programas de remediación de la playa expuesta.
And the final recommendation is the panel recommends that the state and other parties, including Imperial Irrigation District and Imperial County, begin negotiations to create a voluntary transfer program.
Y la cuarta recomendación es que se inicien negociaciones para crear un programa de transferencia voluntaria que involucraría un acuerdo entre el Condado Imperial y otros distritos y el IID, el Distrito Imperial de Irrigación. Okay, so what will happen to the reports now? ¿Qué pasa ahora con los reportes?
The reports have been submitted to the state, to the Salton Sea Management Program. And they are also online for the public to read. Well, we'll get to this in a moment. And the SSMP will review the reports and integrate them as it sees fit into their long-term planning effort.
Yeah, I think the links are a couple slides more down, Brent, if you just want to click it. There you go.
Oh, here it is. Thank you.
El panel ya ha presentado los reportes y también los ha puesto en páginas de internet para que el público los lea y el programa de gestión de Salton sí revisará los informes y los integrará como mejor a ellos les parezca en su esfuerzo de planificación a largo plazo. Y aquí en la pantalla puede ver el enlace si quiere tomar una capturación a la pantalla. You want to take a screenshot of this to reference later, please do so. And Darío is also sharing it in the chat. You just want to copy and paste. Okay. And what will happen to the panel now? ¿Qué pasa con el panel ahora?
Well, as of today, there is no longer a panel. The individuals who served deserve our strong appreciation.
Bueno, pues a partir del día de hoy ya no habrá un panel. Las personas que sirvieron merecen nuestro fuerte reconocimiento y ya no habrá un panel. And what is UC Santa Cruz role and your role going forward? ¿Cuál es el papel de Santa Cruz, de la Universidad de Santa Cruz y el suyo ya para en el futuro?
It was my honor to serve as principal investigator, which means working as a liaison between the panel, the state, the research support team, and the public. We have successfully completed the project, so I will shortly be the former principal investigator. Separately from this project, other UC Santa Cruz faculty and students have an interest in the region, so you might hear from UCSC researchers again, but not specifically related to this project.
El profesor Jada nos dice que para él fue un honor servir como investigador principal del proyecto, lo que significó trabajar como enlace entre el panel y el Estado y el equipo de apoyo de investigación y el público. Ya se ha completado con éxito el proyecto, por lo que en breve él será el investigador principal anterior después del día de hoy. Y aparte de este proyecto, otros profesores y estudiantes de la Universidad de Santa Cruz tienen interés en la región, por lo que es posible que tengan noticias de la Universidad de Santa Cruz nuevamente en el futuro, pero no serán relacionadas con este proyecto. So do we have any additional materials developed by the panel besides the reports? ¿Hay otros materiales que el panel ha desarrollado a pesar de los reportes?
We would like to share some materials with the public that were developed to help the panel become familiar with the region and the submissions. And so this goes back to this previous slide, if I can get there. Let me invite UC Santa Cruz doctoral student, Daniel Hastings, to introduce a mapping tool he created for the panel that is now available to all of you. Daniel?
Can I just translate that really quick?
No, I'm sorry.
También quería compartir que hay algunos materiales con el público que se desarrollaron para ayudar al panel a familiarse más con la región y previamente quiere invitar al estudiante a Daniel Hastings, es un estudiante de doctorado de la universidad y quiere presentar una herramienta del mapa que el panel creó y ahora está disponible para ustedes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So this is a mapping tool that I have created online. It was it will actually be available on Monday at the link we provided below, but this is a little preview of what you'll see on our website on Monday. I created it. Oh, sorry.
Oh, este es el mapa. Quiere enseñar de que es un previo de lo que será disponible el lunes y usan el enlace que se compartió en la pantalla anteriormente.
So the map was created to visualize spatial data related to the Salton Sea in an effort to make it easier to solve these problems. And I put in a variety of layers. These are all of the proposed pipeline routes that the different submissions submitted, and you can visualize those in here.
Y aquí nos está enseñando los diferentes capas que tiene este mapa que Daniel nos está demostrando que si le marca las letras de abajo va a salir cajitas arriba a la izquierda y cuando le prende una puede mirar diferentes cosas que se prenden en el mapa.
I've compiled a bunch of different layers involving the water in the Salton Sea and the playa levels, all types of other infrastructure in the area, such as geothermal resource areas and electrical substations, land use and land cover phenomena that have been relevant to our discussions, social factors such as poverty status and other items that you can explore in this map.
Así que Daniel nos está demostrando las diferentes capas que se actualizan en el mapa, nomás le pone la palomita prendida azul y tiene diferentes capas que viene siendo como ingresos, la infraestructura, los proyectos que se han propuesto, son muchas cosas, así que los apoyamos en que usen esto como una herramienta para que la comunidad haga más advocacia en la región.
I hope that you find this useful, and this will be posted on the Institute for Social Transformation website, and there will also be an explanatory video that explains how to use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Este mapa será disponible en la página del instituto que se acaba de enseñar en la página pruebe. Y diría que muchas gracias por su tiempo y también con el enlace al mapa también habrá un video que demostrará cómo usar este mapa. Y eso es todo. Anything else, Brent, before we turn to Q&A? Oh, I think you're on mute, Brent.
Thank you, Daniel. And yes, just three things. The first is if you, the public, have questions or comments on the panel's work and findings, please direct them to the SSMP, and I think I can provide no, I guess
It's it should be on the slide, on the slides. It's like one of the last slides.
okay, let's see if I can, well, for
Like,
some
there's a
reason.
clicking the link.
Oh, there it is. I
go.
kept clicking the link. So here is the comment email. If you have questions, comments about the panel's work. And so that's the first thing.
Antes de comenzar con las preguntas del público, quería primero de informarle 3 cosas el profesor Haddad. Una sería de que si usted, el público, tiene preguntas o comentarios sobre el trabajo y los hallazgos del panel, dirígeselos al programa de gestión del Salton Sea. Y este es el correo electrónico, si le quiere tomar una captura, ellos tomarán el liderazgo en esto ahora.
So second, I'd like to thank you, Azucena Beltran, for your tireless and excellent work as project coordinator. And in addition, I'd like to thank all of the research support team for their hard work and commitment to the project.
Y en segundo lugar, Brent Haddad me dice gracias a mí por mi involucración en el proyecto y también le quiere decir gracias a todos los que están en el equipo de apoyo por hacer gran esfuerzo en toda la investigación del trabajo y el compromiso que tuvieron durante el último año para esto.
And then now I'd like to invite James Newcomb of DWR to say a few words now that the panel's work is complete. If you're with us, James.
Yeah, I'm here, Brent. Thank you. It just took me a second to unmute.
If you can share the screen, maybe, Brent?
Sure.
Did you
Are
unmute
you there,
yourself,
James?
James?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, great. So for those of you that don't know me, I work with the Salton Sea Management Program for the Department of Water Resources, and I'm currently assigned to lead development of the long-range plan. I want to acknowledge that the reports released today are certainly a monumental milestone, but it is one of the many milestones ahead of us in restoring the Salton Sea. And I'm thankful for this final report, and we will use it as one information point among many other points in developing the Salton Sea Management Program's long-range plan, which is due at the end of this year. I want to start by acknowledging and thanking community members for their continued interest and advocacy in restoring the Salton Sea. And for those that weren't aware, and as a reminder, this process occurred independent of the state's typical process out of enormous public request. And so if some of you might be wondering why there was some independence here, that's really was the result of the public asking for it. Secondly, I want to thank the respondents to the requests for information. Those respondents dedicated significant time and a depth of expertise into developing really elegant and thoughtful solutions to the environmental challenges at the sea. And of course, without that effort, this process could not have occurred. And then thirdly, we also want to say that we appreciate the work of the independent review panel and the time spent assessing the numerous concepts for water importation. I want to be clear that the report did come out yesterday. We did not get an advanced final copy, and we have not completed thorough review of the final report. But up until this point, we have supported the process that the panel has used, and I appreciate the process that was undertaken. And then finally, I want to thank the UC Santa Cruz support team, lead you, Brent Haddad, and Azucena Beltran, for supporting this effort and ensuring delivery of the final report against numerous challenges. And again, thank you to all parties. So the state will now incorporate this report into the long-range plan. I'll touch on a little bit what that looks like. We're going to do that with input from the long-range plan committee, which until this date has focused on concepts that do not rely on water importation. The long-range plan is due at the end of December, and unlike the report shared today, the long-range plan is not going to conclude with a recommendation of a single project. And the reason for that is while we feel like we are honing in on a select few projects that could meet our goals and objectives, we also know and acknowledge that key uncertainties remain, particularly in the area of future hydrology. For those of you monitoring the chat, numerous concepts are being brought up about the Colorado River Basin and the dire situation that currently exists. And we know that future hydrology should best be answered through a peer review process, and that our evaluation a more in-depth evaluation before selecting a preferred project should come through a formal environmental review process sometimes referred to as NEPA and CEQA. That process is a necessary step in selecting and constructing a project. We also know that the challenges at the Salton Sea are best addressed through partnerships. And while we don't have a formal agreement, and I will have to wait to make a formal announcement, the state, along with Salton Sea Authority and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, have shared interest in preparing a joint environmental document for ultimately the long-range project at the Salton Sea. And we anticipate that this work will start immediately upon delivery of the long-range plan at the end of this year. So I'll close with touching on just a little bit of what the long-range plan actually will do. So it will evaluate both in-basin concepts and the 3 water importation concepts that were evaluated in the feasibility report. That includes the Sea of Cortez water importation concept. Our evaluation is going to focus on a project's ability to deliver better air quality, water quality, and habitat against their relative costs and risks, particularly as it relates to hydrology. So I'll close by saying that there's an awful lot of work to do with that was going to require continued public input. And I really look forward to our continued work with interested parties to identify and implement long-term solutions at the sea. So I'll turn it back over to you, and thanks again, Brent.
Thank you, James.
If I briefly just say kind of a summary of what James said.
Yeah, please.
Brevemente, un resumen corto de lo que dijo James, está con el Estado en el programa de a largo plazo. Le quiere decir gracias al panel por su trabajo, gracias al público por estar aquí y gracias a los grupos que metieron una solicitud para conceptos de importación de agua. En su totalidad, él quiere decir que el Estado no ha leído todo el reporte que se acaba de publicar, pero sí quiere decir que el panel tiene el apoyo del Estado para el proceso y habrá más detalles por ellos decir ya cuando puedan digestionar todo lo que dicen los reportes. También él quiere decir que en aspectos de proyectos de a largo plazo, ellos están también mirándose en maneras en que se pueda evaluar conceptos que no involucran importación. Así que quería dejar el mensaje de que si hay un proyecto, no sería un solo proyecto seleccionado, sino una compilación de diferentes proyectos. Y eso es todo. That's it.
All right. Thank you. And thank you all for listening, and we have time for questions. And if you'd like to ask any questions, please raise your hand. And also there have been some really good questions that have come up in the chat as well, and we'll try to get to some of those. Let me just say we have a hard stop. If we go that long, we have a hard stop at 7:30 p.m. Because one of the participants is slipping away from a wedding pre-wedding party, and that participant is in so much trouble already. We don't want to get them into any more trouble. So, Jason, why don't you go first? Jason Mcbride.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we can now.
Hey, so I appreciate all the work here to date. So it sounds like this process is still continuing. Is there a way for us to continue to contribute ideas or be of productive help to the panel or whatever organization or agency takes us on to the next step?
Yeah, thank you for that question, which is how can anyone participate, contribute, bring new ideas? And that is something that the state is taking the lead on through its, I guess it would be its long-range planning committee. And James, if you're here, if you'd like to briefly comment on that, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry, there's a little delay in coming off mute. So we're definitely still interested in ideas The long range plan itself is due at the end of this year, and so it would be difficult to evaluate a brand new concept. But at the opening of the environmental review process, there is a period of time where alternative formulation occurs. And so any concept or idea that you want entered into that consideration for alternative formulation can be sent to the SSMP email address that Brent had shared earlier and has also been posted in the chat. And we will find a way to memorialize that in the report and the long plan itself under a certain section for consideration as during the public scoping process that will begin and is anticipated to begin at the beginning of next year.
Okay. Jason dio la pregunta de que para si todavía se están solicitando ideas para la restauración del Salton Sea, importación de agua o ideas nuevas para el problema. Y James nos acaba de informar que sí se están solicitando todavía y que por favor si tienen ideas que las manden al correo electrónico del estado que se compartió previamente en la presentación.
All right. Tom, you're next.
Thank you. Question for, well, first off, thank you for presenting the 3 concepts with a variation that the panel created. And have a question about, and this is probably for Drs. Haddad and Suri. In 3 of those concepts, you have a 100 million gallon per day desalination plant at the Salton Sea, which is defined to be RO. You mentioned in the tonight that it would be standard technology based on the assumption of a 50% recovery rate based on the costing at about $1.2 billion or thereabouts. It looks like you're proposing something similar to a standard seawater RO plant. First question is that the case? And if that's not the case, is it some other type of reverse osmosis?
I can take that one. It is a standard reverse osmosis system that's being proposed.
Okay, thank you very much. So looking at the fact that by the time that plant is built, the Salton Sea is already double Pacific Ocean salinity. It's by the time that plant is built, even on a fairly fast track basis, the Salton Sea that you're drawing water from, you've got talking about a pipeline out from the west shores, 1.9 miles into the sea, and drawing that water is going to be 3 to 4 times the salinity of the Pacific Ocean. So how do you possibly get a 50% recovery rate from a seawater RO plant when you have a hypersaline water source?
Yeah, that's something that we talked about because the assumption with ocean desalination is about a 50-50 recovery rate. And the sea will be far more saline when it's actually being in the early years. And so what we decided in the modeling was that this was a situation where over time the sea's salinity would decrease and the capture rate would improve in terms, or the efficiency, I should say, of the plant would improve. And so a 50% assumption was sufficient for our modeling purposes.
Initially, you're not going to get better than 30% recovery rate at the best. And your modeling of the amount of salt removed definitely looks to be like a 50% recovery rate assumption. So that does not seem to square. So can you explain how you get so much salt removed when you're only and so much water, if you're getting a 30% recovery rate, then you're not putting 100,000 acre feet of purified water back into the sea. And you've got, yes, you've got a lot of salt in the outflow. And are you assuming that? And have you factored into your modeling that you're going to have much less than 100,000 acre feet going into the Salton Sea? And are you then going to buy even more Colorado River water in order to offset that low efficiency in the many early years of the process?
Well, I wish I was in a position to be the person buying, but it would be the state, not me, who's managing this program. And the principle is that the amount of water acquired through voluntary transfer would equal the amount of water removed from brine, from the brine effluent removal. And so if it were a very rainy year and there was more inflows to the Salton Sea, there would be less water needed through voluntary transfers. If it were a different year, and whatever it is, the concept is that the voluntary transfers replace the brine effluent water removed, and so that would set the amount of water that would be needed through a voluntary transfer program. And as far as the rest of the modeling, the panel and the support team made a model that it stands behind, but clearly before the program was finalized, it would have to go to a much greater level of detail. For example, the cost estimates that the panel presented are considered to be within 50% on the bottom end and within 100% on the top end. So these are, and that's the mid-range. So I would say that these are excellent questions that would go into the next round of study and review on the desalination plant.
Okay, I'll take it that it hasn't really been figured out yet, and there's a lot of work to do to make that actually work. And I would also suggest that reverse osmosis alone is probably not your best technology choice for hypersaline water. On the cost that you mentioned, you've got, here's an example. For the water exchange desal project, the second of three, shall we say, you've got a cost estimate of the pipeline coming from Sonora State up to the Morelos Dam of $12 billion. You've based that on the Black and Veatch study, which also estimated a similar desal plant on the state of Sonora coast, Puerto Penasco, and actually they considered 4 locations along the coast of Sonora State. And they estimated that cost of essentially the same pipeline length, same pipeline capacity, at a little over $1 billion. So can you explain how the cost of the pipeline from the Black and Veatch study escalated by a factor of 10?
Well, that is a question of such detail that I would have to go back into the report and look at it and confirm that what you're suggesting is true, and then generate an explanation. And I'm perfectly happy to do that, but I wouldn't be able to do it right now at our meeting.
Fair enough. I'd be interested to hear that at some time by email or any way that it can be done. And considering that, I would very much like to understand why the choice was made with respect to the Sea of Cortez import project that the panel created, cherry picking a few high cost items out of the three RFI submissions, but really the panel's own proposal. Why was a choice made to do such an expensive conveyance instead of doing a canal, which could have cost between $1.5 and $2 billion for the 190-mile course from San Felipe to the Salton Sea? You chose to do two parallel 108-inch pipelines buried deep underground at very high cost, totaling, instead of a couple of $1 billion for a canal, you went to $26 billion, not counting another 61% of 30% contingency, 15% profit, 8% insurance, et cetera, layered on top of that. So my question is, if you do the calculation on a canal, you lose approximately 10% of the water flowing in the canal, if that canal is flowing at a reasonable rate. Okay, so why go to a very expensive pipeline at 10 times the cost of the canal when you could do a canal with a moderate evaporation loss for vastly less money? What's the real basis of that choice?
The fundamental principle for all the engineering studies that we did was that this be a reliable project for decades to come. And that's been what's guided our engineering team, and the piping approach was the approach that made the most sense. So that's why it was chosen.
I don't really
So what I'd like to
understand,
do,
but go ahead, sorry.
what I'd like to do, Tom, is there are some questions in the chat, and we've allotted everybody 2 minutes, and so what I'd like to do is go to some of those, because I saw some good ones in the chat, and then Ken will come back and get your question. So now I need to find it. It was from Jenny Ross, and I'll be there in just a second. Okay, it was at 6:18 p.m. if you want to scroll and try to find it, from Jenny E. Ross. And she writes, regarding hazardous dust, Azucena, would you like to translate? I'm sorry that I didn't include
I can just give a summarized, very down summarized version of, not nearly as good as all the details Tom said, but I'll try my best, Tom. Tom él dio un proyecto de importación. Al proyecto, él fue un líder de los que hizo un proyecto y lo metió para que fuera evaluado por el panel. Y él estaba simplemente preguntando detalles sobre la recuperación de agua con la planta desalinadora, y preguntó preguntas en detalle sobre la planta desalinadora como reversa osmosis, y le confirmaba que era en uso estándar, y siguió en un diálogo de cosas más factibles, más específicas sobre el reporte, la cual desafortunadamente no pude memorizármelas al mismo tiempo, pero básicamente era un diálogo sobre cosas más específicas sobre el reporte, más técnicas. Yeah.
So thanks. So Jenny Ross writes, regarding hazardous dust emissions, minimize is not synonymous with eliminate. Given that it is impossible to eliminate hazardous dust emissions using dust control measures, why was the recommended approach, which will leave vast regions of exposed lake bed rated the same as ocean water import to refill the Salton Sea, which will truly eliminate the hazard.
Jenny y Ross preguntan en el chat de que una pregunta sobre las emisiones de polvo. Quiere decir que minimización no es lo mismo que eliminar y quiere notar que es imposible eliminar a polvo y emisiones que tienen polución y con solamente usando controles de polvo, como programas de control de polvo. Está preguntando que por qué lo que el panel está recomendando, que ella piensa que en que actualmente dejan vaya playa en el Salton Sea, sería lo mismo que, porque es de que el Salton Sea que siempre no quieren eliminar las cosas de polvo que son de polución y pueden dañar.
So this is a really great question, and the panel looked in great detail at playa remediation, and it learned a number of things. The first is that the playa itself is not the major contributor to air quality problems in the region. The second is that the playa itself has areas that are highly prone to emissions and areas that are not prone to emissions. And if I recall correctly, it's because of for example, it's because of the clay content of the playa, where in some places there's so much clay that it's not susceptible to releasing dust during the heavy winds. And then the third thing is that the panel's recommended approach would remediate all of the dust susceptible playa that remains. And that's a major part of the proposal, is doing that remediation. And so minimize means minimize. It doesn't mean eliminate. But the panel was very sensitive to air quality problems and risks, and feels that that's the best approach.
La respuesta de Brent a Jenny, que está preguntando que por qué la recomendación del panel no está resolviendo el problema con la playa, la tierra expuesta. Y Brent dice que el panel piensa que no toda la playa está en el mismo nivel de contaminaciones que otras partes de la playa que sí tiene. Así que está distribuido por niveles de contaminaciones. Y también no toda la playa es en el mismo nivel de que se podría ir al viento cuando hay muchos vientos en la región. Así que no toda la playa es el mismo nivel de contaminante. Y quiere decir que el panel piensa que sí se fijó mucho en la calidad de aire en la región y que piensa que es posible minimizar la playa que sería expuesta con la recomendación que ellos hicieron.
So, Ken.
Thank you, Brett. How much water do we need in the Salton Sea per day?
Ken pregunta cuánta agua se ocupa en el Salton Sea por día.
So the normal inflows are modeled at about excuse me, 717,000 acre feet per year. And but if you look at the reports, you'll see that the panel has also modeled a 10% increase on those normal inflows, because in the last few years, the actual inflow has been about 10% higher than what is considered to be the normal inflow. So we did both of those models, both the long-term normal plus an additional 10%. And so then the question is, when you say, well, what should it be? I guess the way the panel framed it is, what are the benefits that the region is trying to achieve through inflows to the Salton Sea? And they identified those benefits as the environmental benefits of a functioning ecosystem, and the public health benefits of minimizing the risk from playa dust, and the economic benefits of a Salton Sea that is really great for fishing and boating and so forth. So then the question is, what is needed to achieve all those benefits? And then the final piece of that question is, when you look at the different options, what are the costs and trade-offs of achieving them? And so while it seems like a simple question, Ken, when you asked it, what's the right inflow? It comes down to decisions about what do you want to achieve from the inflow, and what are the costs of achieving that inflow. And when the panel looked at it, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason that I asked that question is because if we look at other water sources, like for instance, we have sewage treatment system around that area. Like in San Diego, we have 240 million gallons a day that treatment plant treats, and they treat it and dump it to the ocean. So it should be good enough that if you need a cleaner water, you can use that water as a source for the desalination plant. But you went right to the ocean as far as the desalination water source concerned. I was just wondering if sewage treatment system can be looked at as one of the water sources that they produce clean water, and then with the other clean technology like marsh and things like that, we can create a clean environment around the Salton Sea that can further treat that water.
I was just saying that, when would you like to step in with a translation?
I could do it at the end because I'm taking notes, so. you can
Okay.
keep going.
So let me just ask, to clarify, Ken, are you asking if sewage treatment and reclamation should happen in the Salton Sea Basin as a source of water, or if it should be either exchanged or piped in from the San Diego area?
Piping from the San Diego, well, piping or canal from the San Diego. I'm just basically looking at water source. I mean, look at the ocean, the Cortez Sea. Why not, look at the sewage treatment system in San Diego, which produces 240 million gallons a day?
Yes. Okay. So there actually was a submission that made that exact proposal. And
okay.
The panel looked at it, and the issue is that along the South Coast region, from Los Angeles, well, even a little north and on down to the border, all of those urban regions have plans for that water, and they're not going to give it up for use at the Salton Sea. It's all built into their long-term water, their own water reliability plans. And so it seems like that's I was also attracted to that idea, but when we looked into it, that water is already spoken for.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Sure, Azucena.
Kenna había preguntado que cuánta agua se ocupaba para el Salton Sea y Brent respondió con decir de que esa respuesta sería basado en qué beneficios quieres. Basado en qué beneficios quieres, se determinaría qué tanta agua ocuparíamos para el Salton Sea. Entonces, más específicamente, Ken preguntó que está preguntando esta pregunta porque quiere saber si otras fuentes de agua, como agua de drenaje que sea tratada, sería suficiente agua para entrar al Salton Sea y tal vez agua que viene de San Diego o del sur. Y Brent explica que había una sumisión que propuso esa idea y el panel lo revisó y supo que en las regiones del sur de California ya tienen planes para usar esas aguas de drenaje que fueron tratadas para limpiarlas y que ellos no estarían dispuestos en enviar al Salton Sea.
All right, Chris.
Professor Haddad, thank you for your work. I really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, since June 2021 until September 22, how many times you've been at the Salton Sea?
I think in that period just twice.
Thank you.
Okay. Jasmine. Oh, go ahead, Azucena.
Chris Cockcroft nos preguntó cuántas veces había el profesor Haddad visitado el Salton Sea y Bren preguntó que entre el último año nomás ha visitado 2 veces.
Okay, Jasmine.
You got muted again, Jasmine.
There
Okay,
you are.
Now we hear you.
I want to thank panel members for their interest in the Salton Sea region, but I'm curious why the findings were released without a draft version in advance to allow time for public review and comment. Draft documents for the state's Lithium Valley Report, Salton Sea Management 10-year and long-range plan, the CEQA, NEPA environmental documents are all available with opportunity for public input. Also, I'd like to know, how is it realistic to purchase Colorado River water at such a low cost? Also requiring farmers to fallow their fields, creating more dust generating playa, creating economic losses and food insecurity, especially during a time of unprecedented drought on the Colorado River. And also, although I'm not an expert, I do know that it is unrealistic to use reverse osmosis technology to desalinate hypersaline Salton seawater. However, I do support desalination at the Salton Sea for restoration, and we already have a company using proven technology to desalinate Salton seawater for about 15 years, and they have submitted an in-basin restoration plan. And thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Okay.
Would you like me to go ahead, Azucena?
I'm just going
All
to
right.
leave it there so
There's,
that I don't have to. Yeah.
Jasmine, I am so sorry to ask you to do this, but you had a couple of questions in there, and can you remind me what the first one was?
Yes, the first question was, why were the findings released without a draft version in advance to allow time for review and comment?
Thank you. So the processes you described as examples of drafts being released in advance are processes that are part of permitting or political decision making. And the process we used for this panel was more like what the National Research Council does with its expert panels. And in those cases, the expert panels gather information in advance or along the way, and then generate their report and then issue the report. And so that's so that was what this panel did, and it was because it's an opinion by an expert panel, and it's not a like an EIR or draft legislation. It's just an analysis and an opinion from an expert panel. And now you had a second question, and I'm so sorry to ask you if you would.
Oh, no, that's okay. I understand it's a comprehensive question and comment. So with the crisis on the Colorado River, how is it realistic to purchase Colorado River water at such a low cost? And how is it reasonable to expect farmers to fallow more of their fields, creating economic losses, food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. So it's really a choice. It's a trade-off, and it's a decision for the state to make, and also, of course, in negotiation with farmers, IID, Imperial County, and so forth. And the panel, from its perspective, felt that a fallowing program was the best way to make up for water lost from the desalination process, and that overall that approach was superior to bringing water in from the Sea of Cortez. So, and in terms of, is this the right time to do this, given how dire the Colorado River is right now? The panel recognizes that this is not the greatest time to recommend a project like this, but again, it's a matter of trade-offs and a decision to be made ultimately. I suppose by the state, but obviously in negotiation with so many other parties. And then finally, getting to the last part of your question, and that had to do with the cost that was used by the panel. And there is a technical memo that is in the appendix to, I think, the feasibility report. It's one of the two reports that goes into detail on how that cost was determined. But basically, it was modeled off of the behavior of the farmers who participated in a similar program that was associated with the quantification settlement agreement. And what we modeled was what farmers were willing to accept to fallow their fields, and then we had other assumptions built in, but basically this was the price where farmers felt that they were better off fallowing than they were by growing their crop. And so that's where that number came from. So, Azucena.
Jasmine tenía tres preguntas. Una de sus preguntas era de que por qué los reportes no se publicaron con más tiempo avanzado. Y Uren dice que el proceso para publicar reportes es extensivo y es un análisis y opinión del panel, y es por eso que está en diferente tiempo que se puede publicar un reporte. No viene siendo como un reporte hecho para agarrar un permiso para construir algo, que estaría bajo un unas fechas diferentes, sería diferente, pero esa era la razón de por cual no se pudo publicar con más tiempo. También pregunta Jasmine que cómo se podrá comprar agua del río Colorado con un precio tan bajo. Brent dice que si es un acuerdo, un precio bajo se puede negociar. Dice que el panel reconoce que el río Colorado está en sequía, pero sería un trato que se podría hacer, que fuera un tipo de sacrificio para agarrar otra ganancia. Y la última pregunta que Jasmine preguntó es que dice que cómo se espera que los agrícolas presten su derecho de agua para la agricultura, siendo que hay comida escasa, y bajaría la cantidad. Y Brent le responde que los cálculos fueron basados en un programa previo, y basado en lo que pasó en el programa previo, no hubo impactos grandes en la producción de comida.
Still going?
No, that's it.
Okay. Carrie, before we get to you, I'd like to get to another one of the chat questions, and then you'll be next. It's from Frank Ruiz, and it was at 6:52 p.m. And he says, Frank writes, desalinating 200,000 acre feet of water, I guess is what the W is, would remove about 19 million metric tons of salt. No landfill would take that amount of salt. And that is a key, really a linchpin issue in restoring the Salton Sea, is what to do with the salt. And the panel spent a lot of time investigating, is it possible, and how would on-land disposal of salt occur? And eventually, well, the research team interviewed rail companies, the railway lines, and asked about what they would do if they were faced with the opportunity of disposing of this much salt. And what we learned was that this is something that the railway system does, and it would not be we assume it would not be a single landfill. It would be numerous landfills, but that it is possible to dispose of the salt on land and restore the Salton Sea without selling any of the salt. That was the assumption that the panel made, was that it wouldn't be sold. If it can be sold, well, that makes it an easier problem. But the assumption was it couldn't be sold. So now, Carrie.
But let me just say that real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. Frank dice que es mucha sal producida con el tamaño de planta de desalinadora que se propuso, que recomienda el panel, y él dice que no habría dónde se podría exponer esa sal. Bren le responde que es posible de tirar la sal, pero no en un solo lote, sino en diferentes lotes. Y basado en las calculaciones que se presentan en el reporte de factibilidad, es posible disponerse de esa cantidad de sal en diferentes lotes, no en uno solo.
Okay. And we're winding down, but Carrie, please, it's your turn.
Thank you so much. First off, I gotta say, it's been a challenging process, and it's really exciting to see so many people turn up because they are concerned and or believe in the necessity of the concept of adding water to the Southwest for the future of life in the region. I will say, I have two questions. One is, why did you make your own proposals instead of move forward with the recommendations on the three that passed your feasibility analysis? We found that the three proposals you put together fail your fatal flaw criteria. Also, do you believe that a $78 billion project, a $45 billion project, and a $17 billion project with a capital O&M of a couple $2 billion per year is at all realistic for what California might adopt. What we see in the valley is you either expand or contract, you grow or you die. We can choose to taper down the amount of water that we use, like with fallowing, and we can outsource our water sources, and we could import more food from other places, and we could taper things down and keep less things alive, including ourselves, if we choose to. Or we can ensure a sustainable water supply for future generations. And the projects that were presented to you, most of them were far, far, far cheaper. So it's my concern that you didn't take into account the economic feasibility of this, which could be leading towards the state's preference of a perimeter lake, which could be great if there's enough water for it. Even the perimeter lake is fed by one of the dirtiest rivers in North America, if not the world. So if we don't have a clean water source, we are facing another Owens Lake. It's a really sad place. And what I will say is I really, really recommend the engineering teams that put these projects forward, those that have worked on these plans with UC Santa Cruz, to keep working on adding water. We contacted you because we need help adding water. We don't have enough. We need your help to add water. So help us find some cost-effective solutions that do so. And you can answer my 2 questions if you want. I don't know if it's necessary. What we need is your help in bringing all of this science together and figuring out how to add water so we can keep life in the region for future generations sustainably. And I ask you, please, engineering teams, people in this room, this conversation has gotten louder. It's because we know it's doable. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't doable. So please continue to work on this. UC Santa Cruz team, I admire your efforts. There were a lot of flaws there. You needed more time. That's okay. Please keep working on it, and please keep helping us find a sustainable water source for the Southwest for future generations. Thank you. Love you.
Thank you, Carrie. And I think Carrie, I think I will respond to one of the things that you raised, because it is a contrast with what the panel found. And I think just now you were framing what you were saying as the Southwestern United States needs more water. And that, I would say, if that were possible, I guess I shouldn't give a personal opinion because I'm speaking for the panel. But instead, let me just say that's not what the panel was looking at, was water for the Southwestern United States. It was a much narrower charge to the panel. And one of the key things that the panel found was that the focus should be on removing salt from the Salton Sea. And the panel found that you don't have to refill the Salton Sea to its late 20th century level in order to get the benefits that a desalted or lower salted Salton Sea will give. So that I guess that's the key point there. So Azucena.
Gary dio un discurso sobre, preguntó 2 preguntas, pero también dio sus comentarios, y él quiere decir que reconoce que es un proceso difícil. Quiere decir que tiene su primera pregunta de que por qué el panel puso conceptos de ideas que ellos crearon y no procedieron los conceptos 3 conceptos que pasaron las fallas fatales. O sea, que por qué se tuvieron que analizar más ideas y no nada más los 3 conceptos que pasaron las fallas tan fatales. También piensa que los proyectos propuestos, que sí, en realidad pensamos que los proyectos propuestos de billones de dólares sería algo que California quiere adoptar. Él da sus comentarios que no hubo suficiente análisis en los beneficios a la economía, pero da sus recomendaciones a que den más ideas, que traigan más agua a esta región en una manera sostenible y da sus comentarios que es un problema enorme y que reconoce que es por eso por cual tanta gente está aquí. Pero responde que reconoce, nomás le dio su comentario de que reconoce que el sur oeste de los Estados Unidos ocupa agua, pero el panel no se enfocó en traer agua al suroeste de los Estados Unidos. Él quiere dejar el recado de que no se tiene que llenar el Salton Sea para tener los beneficios.
All right, we're coming up on 7:30, and so I think we'll stop there. And I just want to again say thank you to everyone who came out on a Friday night to this meeting, and the panel's work is done, and we invite you to read it and talk about it and comment on it. And I just want to thank again the panel and the support team just for a splendid effort over the past year, a really focused and diligent effort to try to address this very serious problem. So, Azucena.
Ya llegamos a tiempo al final de la junta y quiere reconocer gracias al panel, al equipo de apoyo por todo su trabajo y gracias a ustedes por estar con nosotros en un viernes en la noche escuchando esta junta y participando. Junta está grabada y estará en las páginas del panel para que la puedan ver si la quieren volver a ver o recomendársela a un amigo que no pudo venir. This meeting is recorded and it will be available in the panel webpage under the SSMP in case you want to share it to your neighbor that maybe couldn't come. But thank you all for coming.
Right.